let me start with the first panel of today's summit, which is the public sector panel. And we have four amazing panelists. Unfortunately, just before today's session, we heard that one of the panelists is not going to be able to make it, which is Claire Melamed. But that also means, of course, that we may have a little bit more time among the three other remaining panels, which are amazing in their own rights. And so let me briefly introduce the panelists. So we will be joined today by Johannes Jütting, who is the executive head of PARIS21, working globally on strengthening the official statistics system across the world. Then we have Oliver Weiss, who is the former Chief Data Officer and acting Undersecretary of Economic Affairs at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the U.S. Department of Commerce is the largest data agency within the U.S. And so eager to hear from Oliver how this fourth wave also plays out within government and within open data. And then, of course, we are also joined, as Amandeep also was referring to already, by Ambassador Philip Thigo, who is a special envoy on technology for the President of the Republic of Kenya. Thanks so much for joining, and perhaps we can go into panel mode here and have more of a conversational engagement. But let me get started with Phil, and if I may. And so you've been working for the last many years, because I think the first time when we actually engaged was around open data. And so eager to hear from you, Philip. How do you, anyway, I gave kind of the fourth wave kind of framing, but I'm eager to hear from you, Philip. What's your sense? What wave are we in? Have you seen any progress? Do you feel things are moving in the right direction? And of course, given your leadership and engagement at the AI Commission, also eager to hear how does open data feature within that environment. So there we go. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks so much,
Sure.
Stefan, and
Small amount
thank you
of
for
questions.
inviting us. We'll be fine. I think we've been on this dance for the last 15 years. So it tells you how long we've been trying to get this conversation open data up and running. So I think if you talk about the first, second, and third wave, and I like how your slides captured it, but also it speaks to the same conversation we've been having on the first, second, third, and fourth industrial revolution, that you have many people who are rushing towards the fourth industrial revolution or the fourth wave, yet a majority of the world is still trying to grapple with the first wave. And I think that is something that we flagged even in the high-level advisory body when we talked about these commons, right? And data is one of the very critical commons that, as much as we talk about data, we're not talking about data in the same stage. And so the conversation that, for example, that I'm very keen on and that I've been pushing in this country and largely in the global majority, the global south, is that as much as you're seeing the waves, we still have to invest in the entire data value chain, right? So where there's a first, second, and third wave, there's no shortcut, right? You sort of have to do the open data stuff. You still have to focus on the open government, which is the policy side. And that's where now you start to deal with the issues we are seeing in the fourth wave, which is very much around the issues Amandeep was mentioning and something we flagged on the HLab around unequal representation, right? And I'm sure Johannes will speak about this from the statistical point of view, because this idea of fractured access to data and infrastructure is a problem. We are seeing, as you said, in the global north, where there's sort of the data desert, as you call it, and then you're seeing new instances around synthetic data being introduced. While in the global majority, we're talking about data gaps, right? And populations and data that has not been digitized, right? So majority of our data has not been digitized. And so you see that particular challenge. And so I think to Amandeep's point, that's why we kept on talking about a global AI data framework. It has to be global, because that's where you get sort of equality, but then that has to be grounded on something. And the grounding is the principles we started from the first, second, and third, whether it's transparency, whether it's interoperability, especially across borders and across silos, whether it's inclusive representation, whether it's, so that you mitigate against bias and disproportionately harming marginalized groups. Unless you do that, then we'll see a problem. And so for us in the H Lab, we kept on talking about these common standards because that's how you get common standards on training AI data sets so that you don't have biases, and then being very deliberate in terms of how you address a bias in the data, especially around representation of groups. Issues around, for example, linguistic diversity, because that's what we see a big issue in the fourth wave, right? And not just linguistic diversity, but also cultural diversity, which will remain a challenge if we don't address it. But that's the end of the wave. We still have to deal with the transparency, the accountability, interoperability, which are first, second, and third wave issues.
Wonderful. And also I always, as a facilitator, I always forget to tell the audience that obviously the idea is that you also ask questions to the panelists, and that in a Zoom environment we have this great function called Q&A, and so feel free to post questions in the Q&A, and I will try to address them throughout the panel, or we can even address them directly if one of the panelists feel compelled to do so. Thanks so much, Phil, for that. Now, as it relates to, I do want to come back also to something that Amandeep was saying, which was at the end, which is also, we do need also incentive structures for actually making sure that data is made available. And wonder how that plays out within the kind of the global majority. Because part of the challenge is also, of course, is that this is not cheap, right? And so the question is, anyway, how do we both provide for the kind of the financial support, but also then the kind of the incentives to actually make data accessible and available?
And so I think, and this is something, and it's very sad, Claire is not here. It's a conversation, for example, we've been having with the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data and the United Nations, where a study that we did together with Dalberg Insights made the economic case for data, because that's the biggest case, right? That for every $32 spent on data, for every $1 spent, you save $32. I don't think there's any other case that can be made like that, because if you do not spend money on data, then you spend $32 more. And so once you make that economic case, I think it becomes obvious for everybody. The second part, of course, is about the data value chain, right? If you're talking about modernization and digital transformation, it means we have to invest in the entire stack for data and in the entire data infrastructure. So whether it's internet connectivity, because as you know, if it's not digital and people can't access it, it becomes a problem. They should run compute that we are seeing around AI. It's something that we have to invest in, but also we know you have to use open data if you have to train AI. And of course, we are not saying that open data should not be within, rights and privacy, respecting environments. I think for us, those are things that we can't avoid. But also we look at the global majority, right? So data for a specific country within the context of AI will really not be much, right? If you're going to invest in very big infrastructure. And so then the incentive structure that we've been talking about in our context, especially in the global South, is if you've had this notion of AI factories, right? So the AI factories, for instance, cannot be everywhere. But to be able to compete in this AI economy, but also to be able to bring your economy into the AI or the age of intelligence, it means you have to co-invest. So it's not about one country investing on certain infrastructures, it's a collective investment case.
Right.
But also it means you have to invest across the stack, because data is just not about the data itself, it's the talent, how you collect the data, how you store the data, how you analyze and use it for decision making and action. And so that has been an interesting incentive structure to the extent, for example, for the Africa case, we've been able to work with NVIDIA and Cassava Technologies, for example, to work on 5 AI factories in 5 countries, right? So Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, and Morocco. And so that creates a unique ecosystem for these commons we are talking about, right? So sort of a continental data commons, where those who can invest in the big infrastructures can do it, but then it means everything else will be shared. whether it's a talent to be shared, whether it's a processing capacity to be shared, but also it's beginning to spur infrastructure collaboratives, especially intra-Africa connectivity, because we have a lot of cables landing on the coasts, but not much is happening internally. So that entire conversation, I think, for me, is a bigger incentive, which means countries now know where to invest very scarce resources and not necessarily do things that are not necessarily useful for them or will not be appropriate, right? Because as you know, AI consumes energy and a lot of these things which not many countries have.
Great. Cool, wonderful, and I might come back to some of that, Philip. But let
No
me let me
problem.
go. Yeah, this is excellent. Let me go to Oliver. And so, Oliver, so mandate of the Department of Commerce, but also of many statistical agencies, because of course within the Department of Commerce you had census and so on, is of course to inform the public. And what we see happening now is that the public actually goes to Gen AI to become informed, and quite often gets results that are not based upon official data, right? And so one of the key questions was then, of course, that anyway, I remember all of that we started working on as well, is that why is it that Gen AI answers are not based upon official data? And then the key question was, is actually official data or open data AI ready? Meaning, are they actually ready to be used for instance, training or for augmenting as well? And that's something, Oliver, that you have been focused on. And so eager to hear your assessment, because that was kind of the question that we started with. Is actually open data AI ready, or is actually the official statistics AI ready? And so eager to hear from you, Oliver. Where are we on that journey, and what do we need to do?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for hosting this important conversation. And good to see my fellow panelists. So yeah, I think your framing is right there, Stefan. What we want to enable is a user experience where a user of any data sophistication level can use free and widely available generative AI to get answers to their questions. And if the answers to their questions rely on public data, especially public statistical data, that those AI systems can reliably find the data that they can reliably develop the appropriate query strategy, and then go out and find the data that it needs in order to provide a response back to the user, and that those answers are accurate, have appropriate provenance, and are fit to purpose for the user's response. Like that's what we want, right? And what we uncovered in our work, which is um, at least 2.5 years long now, is there's three strategies. One strategy is to tune or to train a GPT on the nuances and idiosyncrasies of public data. And there have been attempts to do that. There's Census GPT. There's NSF right now is building out a chatbot for US statistical data. I know different countries have experimented with this approach as well. And I think that that's an approach that we should continue to invest in and experiment with. Unfortunately, I don't think just I'm not too sure if any of those will truly satisfy the user need, though, of just your fifth grade child going to the internet and wanting an answer to the question. They're going to have to find that specialized GPT, probably. The second approach, and it's the approach that we really delved into at the Department of Commerce. We set up a working group chaired by Sally Ann Keller, who's the chief scientist at the Census Bureau, and launched into a cross-sectoral engagement process. But how do we as data providers provide data in ways that are not just machine readable, which is the current standard for open data, but machine interpretable, so that we can maximize the probability that an AI can find and interpret our data. And we have a report on Conference's website. I'm sure we can put it in the link there, that lays out those suggested best practices for data stewardship and data publishing. And there's a lot of like basic data hygiene stuff in there, like stuff that isn't new to the data management community. The stuff that is new is really that we have to go beyond document level metadata. That is like, what is this data? When was it created? Who owns it? Those types of things. And those are the metadata that are contained in the DCAT v2 standard, which was the general standard for metadata publishing in like the open data era, right? But we really have to invest in variable level metadata. So like, what are the columns in that data set, and what do those columns mean, and how do they interact with each other? So we recommend exposing those metadata to both humans and AI alike, adopting things like schema.org tagging, which is a common web vocabulary to facilitate both search and AI interaction with digital content, and also croissant, which is a machine learning metadata vocabulary. So those are those things. Then the other third major strategy, and the strategy is so new that it wasn't even contained in our report, was that, so the first one, just to review, is focus on building out the GPTs. The second is focus on data management and meet the LLMs where they are. The third is build out MCPs, model context protocols, which is an innovation that Anthropic introduced to the market in November of last year. And that's quickly becoming the way content providers of all stripes on the internet expose metadata, or really instructions on how to interpret their data, to AI, and especially agentic AI. And this MCP concept has been really critical for Anthropic and other companies in this space, other innovators in this space, to deliver point solutions to users that can actually work well. Like they launched the MCP concept, and then also a solution for the financial services industry at the same time, which is basically like the natural language competitor to the terminals of Your that expose a lot of different financial data. And so this is a concept, MCPs, that I just left the Department of Commerce, but that my team was working on and experimenting on. And actually, I'm really proud of Bella Mendoza, who's an analyst with the US Digital Corps, and they're still there. But they worked with with the USA Spending Team, which is at Treasury, which has very valuable open data, basically on all the spending, federal spending. And before the MCP, creating an MCP, if you use Claude or ChatGPT to try to get answers about federal government spending, it wouldn't work. You'd get a non-response because the AI couldn't really interact with that data. So to answer your original question, Stefan, no, that data was not AI ready. But you can, without actually changing the data, just as a supplement, write an MCP, expose that to an AI, or install it on your server, and that greatly enhances the viability and the reliability of the responses. And it works like magic. And that's a very promising innovation because it's not as resource as intensive as training entire new GPT, nor resource as intensive as adjusting the data and metadata. It's like a nice in-between layer.
Great, wonderful. Thanks so much, Oliver, and thanks also for introducing MCP, which is interesting because I think both Amandeep and Phil were also referring to the need for new standards, and ultimately, I think MCP is kind of a new open standard that really makes a difference in the whole conversation about AI readiness and how we can, especially for public officials, how we can start leveraging their data for Gen AI purposes. I have another question, but let me first go to Johannes, Oliver, and then loop back with all of us. And thanks, Johannes, for your patience. It's always kind of hard, I guess, hearing others and then we want to intervene. But so Johannes, Paris 21 obviously focuses on capacity building within the statistical sector. And so from your perspective, in the current environment, right, where you both have new challenges, but also budget crunch quite often, what do statistical agencies need in order to meet the moment that we currently have?
Thank you very much. It's good to be in this panel. Thank you for associating Paris 21 to this important discussion about open data, its current state, and where do we see it going, and also in particular the link to AI and generative AI. I was happily seeing the setting of the context by Stefan. So if I would answer your question with one word, one could easily say more resources. What national statistical offices are needed is more resources. But to be honest, that would be far too simple. That would be far too simple. And what I think is in this current changing environment, what statistical offices need is an appreciation and recognition of citizens, the need for quality data. There has to be an expressed demand by citizens for quality data. Now, let me take a step back here. And first of all, we are very quickly going always to the negative things. But I think, Stefan, it's good to, from a statistical here, official statistical community side, to appreciate the summer. And just to give and to call out one report that has been produced by our colleagues of Open Data Watch. They do this since a couple of years. It's the ODIN report that assesses now more than close to 200 countries in terms of their state of art in openness of data. And they have a certain methodology. It's all very well developed. And they speak about a decade for progress. It's a decade of progress, specifically in economic and environment data in terms of openness. And for me, we should appreciate this moment. It's like with success in development. We often don't appreciate enough that we have success in health, education, agriculture. Then for me, the question is, what are the drivers of this success? What has been useful for national statistical offices to get to that a better stage? And here, I think, and Philip, we discussed this when we were in the conversation about big data and about setting up GPSTD and data revolution. We know the ingredients of capacity development of national statistical offices all over the world, which is to some extent, it's you can divide this maybe in three boxes. Capacity development. One is the personal, the individual capacity, skills development. Second is organizational in terms of providing financial resources, training opportunities, and so on and so forth to have those institutions doing a good job. And last not least is the institutional environment, it's the governance. And here, Stefan, I mean, you have been writing quite a lot about data governance and statistical governance. And I think here we can say that in many countries, we are working, in many countries, Paris 21 is working. There has been great success And I think we know what the ingredients are. Now, the question also is why and what happens now? And I hear my biggest worry is that, and this is linked to your question to Oliver, if people now go to Gen AI all over the world, they wouldn't go to find official quality data, but they just go to Gen AI or Google and ask for the data. The key problem behind I see is not enough awareness, data literacy for many of our citizens that this quality data is an important resource for democracy, is an important resource for economic and social development. And I think we have to invest more time and energy, and statistical offices have to invest more time and energy to make their voices heard, to reach out to the citizens, to engage them, but also eventually, and we have the citizens-generated data movement and others, to have them part of the data production. So we can develop this later on a little bit further, but I think to answer your question, of course, many statistical offices, you know this very well, we have seen it, there are big budget cuts, both in rich and poor countries, There are sustained cut in aid and official development assistance for this. This is an important problem, but I think we also have to focus on this appreciation of citizens for quality trusted data. Without that, I'm very worried that people will not want to invest in this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Johannes, and much appreciated to bring the citizens' role in the conversation, because quite often it's kind of seen as kind of, you have the data community and then you have the citizens, but if they are not connected, exactly, it's too easy to basically dismiss the importance of high quality official data as well, and also important to reflect on indeed the financial constraints that currently exist within the ecosystem. Now, one way to deal with both, perhaps, Johannes, and I'm also bringing in both Oliver and Philip in this. One way is exactly as what Amandeep was referring to as well, is this notion of a data commons, where and this is kind of a discussion that has been going on for a while, where there is need for high quality data, but how do we bring it together, right? How do we then bring it together in a way that is financially sustainable, right? So that it's not just an investment and then only a few can have access to it, but also from a commons perspective, how does it also take the citizens' perspectives into account on how data is being made available and how it is and for what purpose it is. And so eager to hear Oliver, Philip, and Johannes, how do you look at this data commons as kind of an extension of the open data kind of environment? And perhaps I know Oliver, you worked on that as well. So perhaps if you quickly can reflect on that to get started. And there are questions, by the way, in the Q&A, so I will make sure, or they're already answered as well, but Oliver.
Yeah. I think data commons is a data governance model, right? And I think with the advent of AI or the introduction of AI, I think we're still figuring that out as a data community. Like, how do we do that? Like, one way, when we were talking to interested stakeholders through this process, they suggested that we participate in a data commons. At that point, that data commons was open source, but run by a prominent technology company. And that the best way and the fastest way to meet the user need is to participate and provide data to this data commons. And because it would be open source, that would be That would be an efficient way to move forward with better data interoperability. Turns out that that company made a strategic pivot with that data commons. Decided to go closed source because that was in the business interest of the steward of that commons, because they had to make it financially sustainable, and God bless them. So we made the choice that maybe we shouldn't provide it in the data commons. What we as government should care about is providing the highest quality API as we can with the best possible metadata, so that the various data intermediaries, whomever they will be, can leverage that data however they need to in order to provide data products that are fit to purpose for those users. And so we didn't go into a data commons, and I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I think a lot of those governance issues were evolving and premature. So Stefan, I don't know if I just offer that as a word of caution.
Yeah.
But
No.
I don't want to throw cold water on the idea. I think there's probably lots of good opportunities and use cases for data commons, but let's proceed cautiously.
Great. Philip?
Oh, yeah. So I'd actually go the other way, right? And as I said,
That's
it
the
depends.
great thing about a panel where we have at least some
So-
discussion. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it depends, right? So and I said it, for sort of advanced economies, you're sort of at a level where maybe you're beyond talking about data commons, right? But when you're talking to an ecosystem that is under-resourced, and requires a deliberate intervention to ensure that data is a common, right? It's something that folks need to access it and needs to be treated like a common resource. It becomes very different, especially for the developing world where government is supposed to be omnipotent. Is the largest mechanism that ensures equality of access to everything, and that everything includes data. And so I think for us, and that's what I'm saying, we've gone the other way to ensure that. How do we ensure that you provide this governance framework that ensures that you treat data as a common and shared resource? Otherwise, you have this very unequal sort of context where those who have will continue to have. And when I say data, it's just not the data itself, it's the entire value chain, right? Where there's the internet, the infrastructure. So you need somebody to step in and mediate. And this is the point where, for example, we failed a lot, to Stefan's point, that if the greatest provider of data that will ensure that data is produced in open standards and open formats for everybody to be able to leverage for decision making and action, even for entrepreneurs to create opportunities and businesses, is government, then we need to invest in government to be able to produce that data. And so that data becomes a common. And early stages, we used to say, listen, if governments did not invest in weather data, we probably will not be able to access those capabilities. If governments did not invest in geospatial data and Earth observations, we will not be able to access those. And we are still using those commons up to now, especially for countries like ours. We are still leveraging on Sentinel and Landsat for a lot of the geospatial data and Earth observations. Because if those commons were not there, we cannot access planet data, which is more 50 centimeters. Right? So that's what I'm saying. We are going, at least for us, we still believe it's something we need to have sort of a shared stewardship, that no one actor owns these sort of high value data sets that have potentially high impact, especially for development, decision making, and outcomes.
Great. Johannes, let me go back to you and see whether you have any reactions to that, but also how do you see this discussion of AI and then data commons for AI play out within kind of the countries that you're working in?
Yes, thank you very much. On the data commons side, I think it's important we discuss on which level we're discussing here, data commons at national level, regional level, and local level. So where what I have seen, and specifically linked to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the data sourcing and to all the discussions that have started through the SDGs at the local level, there has been quite, in lots of countries, particularly Kenya, where PARIS21 is also very active and has partnership with the statistical office, but also with civil society groups, is to have data commons at the local level, which is something really interesting to look at and to understand how they work and why they work. For me, the incentives, why would citizens spend time to share data and to engage? Why would they do this? They have other things to do, because sometimes we equate participation with something is good, but people are busy and they have other things eventually to do. They would do this if they see that this data that they provide will eventually change public services. It's all about education. So if I report back, teachers are not showing up in school. If I report back, healthcare is for free, but I have to do under the table payments. If I can report back the climate change sort of reign and I get better services by the extension service of the government, if I see this happening, if I see action, I will provide data and I will engage. So for me, the data commons idea is very interesting. The challenge is the scaling up. It's like a classical development challenge. We often have small projects, small things, but how do you scale them up at a meaningful level? And I think, Philip, you mentioned a couple of things related to data stewardship, to governance, and incentives. So that's the big question. I think, Stefan, that's something we would need to be sort of look out of very important successes at the local level. How can we scale them up? What are the successes and how can we combine them eventually? The second part of your question was more about AI and the role in the Global South. Interestingly enough, I think this is a very important question, which in our community, I feel is not enough discussed within the official statistical community. It's overall speaking, you might just say, from a very naive entry point, you say, the Global North will benefit tremendously because they have already wonderful statistical systems. And the Global South will be even further behind because we have a digital divide and it will be even growing through AI in a very simplified way. But it's not at all the case. We see some countries which we put in the Global South, so therefore also the term, as we know, is not perfect. But some, let's say, of the emerging economies like Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, Philippines, Colombia are far ahead with using generative AI and also classical AI to produce and use data and statistics. Because they have been very open to the data revolution. They use open data. They have used satellite and big data sources. So that's happening very well. The critical question is for the poor countries. What can we do for the very poor, low-income countries with low capacities? And I think here the jury for me is still open. I think, Stefan, and I think in one of the presentation, the AI for data, data for AI. How can we, in those countries, I'm still convinced that we can use generative AI and AI also in a low capacity context. It can be the mobile phone. Look, what we thought about the mobile phone some 30 years ago in development, if you go back to those conversations, everybody was saying, the mobile phone is only for the rich. No, but it transformed lives basically of the poor people, of the poor farmers. The same can happen with Gen AI in a poor country context if the conditions, the right conditions are put in place. And I think here we need to see what could be the right conditions. And here I'm very happy that PARIS21 has a very nice project with a couple of countries on the readiness for AI, where we assess those things. We also have a task team on this topic where we exactly look at those questions. And I think it's important not to forget those countries that are left behind and think about how we can use AI to bring them at least to the next level of development.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks for those insights, and Johannes, and also to bring in the local level, but also reflecting on how AI can provide value in different kind of contexts as well. I do, and Oliver, there is a question also, or there are a few questions for you in the chat as well, and I might come back to that as well. But one of the big, I would say, aspects of AI and open data is one, from my perspective, and there's actually a question there just being posed, is actually that quality data has become front and center, right? I mean, in the past, when we had open data, there was quality data was important, but it was not as kind of a topic as important as we currently discussed. The second element from my point of view, and also eager to hear from the three of you, is that turns out actually unstructured data has become more or equal, if not more important than structured data for AI. And open data is still very much about structured data. And so eager to hear from you, do we need a broader concept, what we mean by open data? And it goes also back to what Amandeep said, kind of a broader concept even of openness of what data, not just structured data. And how would that play out from your perspective? And also there are some questions. Perhaps why don't I go quickly through all of you to reflect on that question? But also, if you want to address the question that is in the Q&A, Oliver, one is about, I would say, the FAIR principles and the American AI Action Plan, and then the other question is really about quality data, which goes back to my reflection on the importance and the increased importance of quality data, which were mentioned, but also the increased importance of unstructured data from my point of view. I don't know, Phil, do you want to respond? And this is kind of the last round probably that we will have. So any other element that you want to add here, over to you.
No problem. And I think for me, it's again the challenge of this age of intelligence, right? And you've mentioned this kind of fourth wave. The fourth wave is still, I think it's to be very clear that the fourth wave is not new. It's building upon the first, second, and third.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the point that Amandeep was raising, and the point that we were sort of kind of obsessing with in the high level advisory body, was the need for this common, right? So this global AI data framework, which needs to build on top of what we are seeing as emerging, right? If unstructured data is what seems to be I don't want to say as Amandeep, the oil, the land, or whatever fuels the land in this new AI sort of world, then we need to also evolve the frameworks. And so that how do we evolve and standardize? Because you can still have unstructured data, but it can still be standardized. Because the data has to be ingested, it has to be, with inferencing and training, it has to be in a certain standard. And so I think for me, it could be interesting, for example, for the statistical community to sort of start thinking about this, because you guys are very good at this, right? How do we begin to think of these common standards and a common framework? If you look at what has been happening in those big sort of infrastructures that are coming out of the Global Digital Compact, this is one of the things that fell out in the cracks. So I see this as an opportunity for this data community potentially to build or run out. The second part that, and I know Amandeep has been working on this with the Secretary General, is this capacity building framework. Because part of beyond a global AI data framework is also a capacity building framework. Because you sort of want to build people's capacity into understanding this kind of world we are going into, that now sort of has prioritized or seems to value more than structured data. But that unstructured data at some point must be able to drive decision-making and action, and must be able to make sense for everyone, including the folks Johannes is talking about, citizens at the local level, so that they see the value of that data. Yeah.
Great, excellent. Oliver. Oliver, you're muted.
The idea of unstructured data, yeah, absolutely. I think for CDOs everywhere, not just in the public sector, but in all organizations, the domain, part of your role is to prepare your organization's data so that you can use AI effectively. The unstructured data, that's how LLMs work, right? Like the problems that we're having with AI interaction with public statistical data is because the public statistical data is structured and not unstructured. So you either make that data more interpretable to the AI by surfacing a whole lot of metadata, either in the data or through the MCPs, or another approach that I know some people are playing with is just literally to convert a structured statistical table into a whole bunch of sentences, because that sentences and that text is a whole lot more interpretable to LLMs. So yeah, I think that's a real sea change in how chief data officers think, and we think of data stewardship. Just there is a question on the FAIR digital object. I'm just not as familiar with that project would love to learn more. Maybe I can follow up with that questioner who asked that about that specific initiative. And then there was a question about the AI action plan. Yeah, Frank, and I'll say this now because I'm no longer under the employ of the federal government. But I think the AI action plan, with all due respect to Director Kratsios and the team there at OSTP, whom I have a great deal of respect for, I think the data got short shrift in that plan, and there was a lot more that could have been said and called out for in terms of preparing America's public data for the AI era.
Great. Thanks so much, Oliver. Johannes, you were the last in the row, but you also have the last word. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to address that question about quality data. Is it on the rise or not? And I think to be
well,
me,
it's
the jury
definitely
is
more central. Let's put it that way, probably.
or more central or not. I mean, I think the jury is still out. For me, it's
Right.
not yet decided where the train will go. I was just looking at recently at a couple of Financial Times articles, right, which for the first time featured statistical offices. There was, of course, big articles about the latest development in the US Labor Statistical Office with all the things that happen there and will continue eventually happen in the US. There were also articles about the UK office, couple of times. And that wasn't putting official quality statistics in a very good light, I have to say. And for an ordinary layman reading those articles, they would probably have said, "Oh my God, what's going on here? Do we need those offices? What is going on here, and how can we?" I think again, I come back to the point that I mean, we know that, and another article, it's actually a letter by the chairperson of the Statistical Commission, which is Professor George Simon Ulrich, who is arguing for creating a trusted data observatory, which is a sort of metadata platform. It's a metadata platform where ordinary citizens would be directly directed, and you would get access to quality information, just to avoid this situation that we have discussed before, so that the search engines would find quality data, and which of course currently is a problem. They don't. So this trusted data observatory is one way of addressing this. But as we all know, garbage in, garbage out, it's particularly important in the global south to lay the focus on quality data. Quality meaning many different things: unbiased, granular, beyond averages, and so on and so forth. Yes, that would be fantastic. But the question is, and I think we have to be much more outspoken, that this isn't to produce the quality data isn't cheap. It costs some money. It costs resources. It costs sort of, you need technical skills for this. And I think we need to be more vocal. The official statistical community needs to be more vocal that good quality data is important for democracies. It's important for the SDGs and for many other things. If that is not clear, I'm a little worried, to be very honest, that we are driven too much by the focusing on the big companies and some of those conversations that are pushed here. And those sort of more technical sideline conversations are not getting the attention it deserves. Now, I'm just observing. But I'm an optimist, so we will get there. We had a nice summer. Let's hope we will have a late summer and the winter is not coming too early.
So yes, exactly.
And stay on this optimistic side, and we can push the winter back as far as we can. Thank you.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful observation, Johannes, to close this panel. I've learned a lot, as always, by just listening to all of you and to also hear the conversation and even the discussion amongst you, which is always super enlightening. So Phil, Oliver, Johannes, thanks so much for joining us. Perhaps next year, Johannes, we can call you all back to evaluate whether, anyway, we are actually still in the summer or closer to the fall. But this was super important, super interesting, and super enlightening. So thanks so much for making the time, and thanks so much for sharing your wisdom in today's session as well.